To Vanessa, Mom announced, lifting her wineglass above the dinner table. The daughter who organized that fundraiser and saved her father's life. 22 relatives raised their glasses. To Vanessa. I sat 3 chairs away, with my hand pressed beneath the table against the left side of my abdomen. 9 weeks earlier, surgeons had removed my left kidney and transplanted it into Dad. Nobody looked at me. Aunt Carol leaned toward Vanessa. You were his guardian angel. Vanessa lowered her eyes with a modest smile. I just did what needed to be done. My fingers tightened around my napkin. Uncle Raymond added, Thomas is lucky to have a daughter who fought so hard for him. Vanessa raised her glass again. I'd do anything for Dad. That did it. My chair scraped backward as I stood. Mom's smile vanished. Delia, please, she set down her glass. Tonight isn't about competing with your sister. The entire table went silent. I hadn't even said a word. For 9 weeks, I'd slept carefully because rolling onto my side could send pain through my abdomen. I'd missed work, endured blood tests and surgery, and learned how exhausting recovery could be after giving away part of your body. Vanessa had organized the fundraiser. And somehow, that had become the story of how Dad's life was saved. I looked directly at Mom. I'm not competing with anyone. Then sit down, she said quietly. Vanessa sighed. Delia, can we please have one nice evening? I opened my mouth. This time, I was going to tell all 22 people exactly whose kidney was inside our father. But Dad suddenly grabbed my wrist. I looked down. His eyes were wet. Don't leave yet, he whispered. Then he slid a folded napkin across the table. I opened it beneath the edge of the table. Dad had copied part of a message onto it. We received a report regarding discrepancies in the fundraiser associated with your transplant expenses. Asterisk. I read it twice. Then I looked across the table. Vanessa was laughing softly as Aunt Carol congratulated her again. I turned back to Dad. What is this? His grip tightened around my wrist. Something came in this afternoon, he whispered. I didn't want to say anything until I knew there was actually a problem. What problem? Dad glanced toward Vanessa. The hospital says they didn't receive what she said they received. My stomach dropped. That fundraiser had collected tens of thousands of dollars, specifically for Dad's transplant expenses. Vanessa had spent weeks telling everyone the hospital bills were being handled. And 22 relatives had just toasted her for it. Across the table, Vanessa caught me staring. Her smile faded slightly. For the first time that evening, she looked nervous. And one question replaced every word I'd been preparing to say. If Vanessa hadn't actually used all that money for Dad's medical bills, where had it gone? Dad's unpaid hospital statement wasn't the first thing that made me question Vanessa. It was just the first thing I couldn't explain away. Months earlier, Dad's kidney failure had progressed faster than any of us expected. Medication wasn't enough anymore, and after another hospital admission, his doctor called us into a consultation room. A living donor would give Thomas his strongest chance, she explained. Mom immediately started crying. We'll find someone, she said. We have a big family, someone has to match. Vanessa took charge publicly. I'll coordinate everything, she announced. Donations, updates, whatever Dad needs. Within days, she'd created the fundraiser and was posting regular updates for relatives and family friends. I did something quieter. I got tested. When the transplant coordinator called me, her first words were, Delia, you're compatible. I sat alone in my car afterward, staring at the steering wheel. There wasn't much to decide. At the hospital, I told Dad privately. I'll do it. His eyes filled immediately. No, Delia, that's surgery. That's your body. And you're my father. I asked him for only one thing. Don't announce it. I don't want 20 people calling me a hero or trying to talk me into or out of this. Dad respected that. The transplant succeeded. He received my left kidney. I received 9 weeks of recovery. While I was learning how to stand without pulling at my incision, Vanessa became the face everyone associated with Dad's survival. Her fundraiser update said donations were covering hospital expenses, medication, travel, and follow-up care. Then Dad called me one afternoon. "Delia, I'm still getting bills. Probably processing delays." Vanessa said these were paid. That bothered me. But what finally broke something between Vanessa and me happened shortly before the dinner. I cornered her privately. "Why don't you correct people when they say you saved Dad?" She folded her arms. "You gave an organ. I handled everything else. People are allowed to appreciate me too. They think you saved his life." Her expression hardened. "You wanted the donation private, remember? Don't suddenly reveal it because your jealous people appreciate me." I stared at her. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She knew exactly what everyone believed. Later, I found one of Dad's hospital envelopes on the counter. I opened the statement. A substantial balance was still outstanding. My pulse quickened because I'd seen Vanessa's fundraiser update about that exact expense. According to her, it had already been paid. I placed the statement flat on the counter and read the number again. Then I reached for my phone. Back at the dinner table, Dad's napkin changed everything. Mom was still basking in Vanessa's moment, completely unaware of what Dad had just shown me. Aunt Carol lifted her glass again. "That fundraiser was incredible, Vanessa." Uncle Raymond nodded. "I put in $2,000 when you said Thomas's transplant expenses were urgent." Another relative leaned forward. "You told me the hospital bills had been covered, didn't you?" Vanessa's smile tightened. I looked at Dad. He said nothing, but his eyes told me not to drop it. So I sat back down. "Vanessa." She turned toward me. "How much did the fundraiser raise?" The conversation stopped. Mom frowned. "Delia." "I'm asking Vanessa." Vanessa placed her glass down carefully. "About 68,000. $68,000. Yes." I held her gaze. "How much of it went directly toward Dad's medical expenses?" Mom slapped her palm against the table. "Enough." Every face turned toward her. "You've been sulking all evening," she said. "You're not going to ruin your sister's moment because you can't stand seeing her appreciated." Vanessa shook her head, as if I had disappointed her. "Seriously, Delia, you want me to produce receipts at dinner?" "No," I said. "I want an answer." Dad finally pushed his chair back. "Then I'll give you one." Mom stared at him. "Thomas." Dad placed both hands on the table. "The hospital contacted me." Vanessa went still. Dad continued. "They confirmed they received only a fraction of what we were told had been paid toward my expenses." The silence was immediate. Uncle Raymond lowered his glass. "What does that mean?" Vanessa answered before Dad could. "There were other expenses, transportation, medication, things Dad doesn't remember." "Then show us," someone said. Another relative spoke from the opposite end of the table. "I donated because you specifically said Thomas had hospital bills." Questions started coming from everywhere. Vanessa's face reddened. Mom raised both hands. "Stop interrogating her. She spent months helping your father." Uncle Raymond turned toward Mom. "If we gave $68,000, why is Thomas still getting unpaid bills?" Mom had no answer. Neither did Vanessa. She grabbed her phone from beside her plate and stood. "I don't have to sit here while everyone treats me like a criminal. I'm leaving." She took one step. Dad's voice stopped her. "Vanessa." She turned. Dad didn't raise his voice. "The hospital isn't the only organization that reviewed the account." Vanessa stopped beside her chair. "What does that mean?" Dad reached for his phone. It means when the bills kept arriving, I started asking questions. Vanessa glanced at Mom. Dad's confused. He's been recovering for weeks. I know exactly what I asked. Nobody moved. Dad explained that conflicting fundraiser statements and unpaid medical balances had triggered a formal review. Someone was now tracing the deposits, withdrawals, and transfers connected to the fundraiser account. I received preliminary documentation this afternoon, he said. Vanessa's expression changed. For months, she'd told relatives their donations were paying transplant expenses. Those same bills remained unpaid. And now Dad had documentation showing transfers after donations entered the account. Vanessa finally spoke. Some of that money covered family-related expenses. I stared at her. Minutes earlier, she'd implied the money had gone toward Dad. Now the explanation was changing. Mom heard it too. What family-related expenses? Vanessa snapped. Things Dad needed. Then where are the records? Mom asked. For the first time that night, she wasn't defending her. Vanessa pointed at me. This is because of her. Delia has been angry because people thanked me, and now she's turned Dad against me. Dad stood. No. Vanessa froze. Delia didn't discover this. I did. He picked up the folder beside his chair. When unpaid invoices kept arriving, I started making calls myself. Then he looked directly at Vanessa. And effective tonight, you no longer have access to any financial account you manage for me. Vanessa's mouth opened. Dad wasn't finished. You're also removed from financial control of the family charitable foundation. Dad, that decision is made. Mom stared between us. But why is Delia involved in any of this? Dad turned toward her. There was something in his expression that made Mom's voice disappear. He was about to answer when his phone rang. Everyone looked down at the screen. Dad answered. Hello. A voice responded, and Dad immediately pressed the speaker button. The person identified themselves as the reviewer handling the fundraiser reconciliation. Vanessa slowly lowered herself into her chair. Dad asked, have you finished? Yes, Mr. Carter. Nobody at the table made a sound. Then the reviewer continued. We've completed the transaction reconciliation. Dad's fingers tightened around the phone. The voice on speaker said, Mr. Carter, we can now account for where the missing fundraiser money went. Nobody reached for a glass now. Dad placed his phone in the center of the table, while the reviewer explained what the records showed. The fundraiser had collected approximately $68,000. Only a portion had gone toward legitimate transplant-related expenses. The rest hadn't disappeared because of hospital processing delays or accounting mistakes. There were multiple transfers from the fundraiser account into Vanessa's personal account. The records also connected those funds to personal spending unrelated to Dad's medical care. Uncle Raymond slowly pushed his chair backward. You took our money. Vanessa's face drained. I was going to put it back. Mom stared at her. Vanessa. I handled everything for months. I had expenses. Dad's voice cut through hers. You told people their donations were paying my medical bills. Vanessa looked around the table, but the relatives who had toasted her minutes earlier weren't smiling anymore. Several immediately demanded complete records of their donations. The disputed transactions were formally reported. Vanessa was required to repay the diverted money as the financial process moved forward, and Dad confirmed she was permanently removed from managing both his accounts and the family's small charitable foundation. But Mom still tried to salvage something. What Vanessa did with the money was wrong, she said carefully, but she still organized everything. She still helped save your life. Dad looked at her. No. He stood. Then he turned toward the 22 relatives around the table. You've all been thanking the wrong person. My chest tightened. Dad. He looked at me. You protected everyone else's feelings long enough. Then he faced the family. Delia was my living donor. Silence. Mom's wineglass slowly lowered. Dad continued. The kidney keeping me alive came from her. Aunt Carol stared at me. What? Her left kidney, Dad said, 9 weeks ago. Suddenly, every absence they had interpreted as indifference had an explanation. I hadn't disappeared while Dad recovered. I had been recovering too. Dad explained that I'd undergone compatibility testing privately, agreed to the operation, and asked him not to turn my donation into a family spectacle. Then he looked at Vanessa. She knew. Uncle Raymond's expression hardened. Vanessa immediately defended herself. Delia wanted it private. I finally answered. Privacy wasn't permission to rewrite the truth. Vanessa opened her mouth, then stopped. There was nothing left to hide behind. Aunt Carol looked down at the glass she'd raised to Vanessa. Delia, I'm sorry. Dad walked around the table and stopped beside me. He rested his hand on my shoulder. Thank you, he said. Not because I owe you praise, because I owe you the truth. Mom couldn't meet my eyes. Her instinct to defend Vanessa, even after learning about the money, changed our relationship permanently. I stopped chasing the approval I'd spent years trying to earn. I set boundaries with both Mom and Vanessa. If a family gathering required me to swallow disrespect to keep everyone comfortable, I simply didn't attend. Vanessa's consequences didn't end at that table. The relatives who had trusted her demanded accountability. Several stopped involving her in anything financial. She lost control of the charitable foundation, faced the formal fraud complaint connected to the fundraiser, and had to repay the diverted funds through the process that followed. Most painfully for Vanessa, she lost the reputation she'd protected so fiercely. She had entered that dinner as the family's heroic daughter. She left without control of the money, without the trust of the donors, and without the story she'd allowed everyone to believe. Months later, Dad continued getting stronger. So did I. My recovery eventually ended, and my relationship with Dad became closer because we stopped hiding uncomfortable truths to protect other people's feelings. Whenever someone called Vanessa the daughter who saved him, Dad corrected them. Every time. I never asked him to. And I never asked my family to raise another glass for me. I didn't need the glass raised in my honor. The kidney keeping my father alive had already told the truth.